What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only SPY, the Nasdaq, the QQQs, and the indices. Break down what the charts are telling us and what happened with the market today, because we were shopping around for the majority of the day, but we did see a big sell-off at the very end after something that involved Biden just came out. So I'm going to break down what's going on with the debt ceiling and what Joe Biden just announced, what's going on with the markets right now and how this could affect us moving forward, and what big catalysts are coming out for tomorrow. Before I break anything down about this, though, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things real quick. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. The offer ends in just a couple of days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Looking at the market, SPY was down 0.67%. And we had a very interesting day. One of the things I pointed out is looking at the 1 hour time frame, SPY has been stuck in this pennant right over here, right? Going back and forth and just trading sideways over and over again. It started to get tighter and tighter over the last couple of days, and it could have even continued to do so for tomorrow, but instead we actually broke below it at the very end of the day. We were holding right over here on the 1 hour time frame, holding over and over again, bouncing off support over and again, being stuck between 411 and 412 for almost the entire day. We didn't really do anything. We're just trading back and forth, waiting for any confirmation from the negotiations between Kevin McCarthy and President Joe Biden. And to end the day, we got some news that came out that caused the market to sell off. And we got a red close on SPY. The QQQ almost turned red, but it held up, barely closing green thanks to Google. And as a result, the market is still looking a little bit weak. So now let's break down what's happening with the market. The first piece of news that came out was right here. Let me just find it. President Joe Biden has announced that he's going to be returning from the G7 summit on Sunday, much sooner than what was expected. Why? Because today Biden and McCarthy were negotiating about the debt ceiling limit, and they weren't able to come to a resolution and close the deal yet. And this was as expected. Typically, when events like this happen, they're just delayed until the last minute. There's no surprise right over here. Politics obviously gets in the way. And going forward, Biden was not able to come to a conclusion just yet. So Biden is supposed to go tomorrow. I believe he's going to Japan for the G7 summit. And he's supposed to be going to other Asian countries, but he's going to be cutting the last two so that he comes back earlier and then they could focus more on the debt ceiling. Now, many people could question his decisions themselves, but the bottom line is this whole debt ceiling is not going to be fixed easily. And typically what happens is, like I said before, they just continue to argue both sides of Congress, both sides of the political aisle. They just argue and argue and argue. And there could be some fear that is incited because of this. But what tends to happen is the deal does end up coming. They end up raising the debt ceiling and we don't end up defaulting. But it happens during the last minute. And that's what it seems like is going to happen now. Now, if they continue to delay it, because now Biden's going to be leaving the country, he won't be back for a couple of days, there could be more fear that is established because of this. Especially because we have so many, House speakers and senators speaking more and more about this. Mitch McConnell came out and said that a deal should be closed this week or within a week. And Chuck Schumer came out and said that some progress has been made. So, some good things have come out from Schumer and Mitch McConnell, but other than that, on paper, so far, there's not been any true deal that has been closed, and this fear could continue. Now, another thing I want to note is that for Canada, they reported their inflationary numbers, and it was higher than expected. So inflation is going up in Canada, and that could be a sign that we may see something like this in the USA due to similar circumstances. Because here in the US, we're going to be watching what happens with oil production. Oil production going up could lead to another increase in gas prices and for other commodities going forward as we approach the summer. Now, it's just a possibility. I just want to note that when it comes to earnings for tomorrow, we have Target, Jack in the Box, and a couple of other ones like Wix. Nothing too massive, but then for Thursday, we do have Alibaba, Walmart, and Ross. I think Thursday is going to be just as big. So these are going to be the two biggest days for earnings. Besides that, there's not a whole lot going on. And then finally, we have some economic data to discuss. For Wednesday, we have the mortgage data, mortgage applications data, building permits data all coming out. Then we have some crude oil data. All of this is important, just not extremely significant. And we're going to be watching for what the news says about the debt ceiling because the odds will favor it causing a bit of a sell off as fear continues, right? That's what the odds are starting to favor. But I'm still holding my bigger, more medium term picture, and that is there's likely downsides still coming to the markets regardless as we approach the June period. Before then, it is possible for the market to try to hold up again temporarily. For the bulls, if there's any hope for the bulls, we have to see the market get back into this wedge or this pennant right over here on SPY. We have to do that. We need to hold up for there to be hope for the bulls. Because if we fail to do it and we start getting this rug pull here, SPY is going to be retesting 410. If that fails, there's 409 obviously. If that fails, there's 408.87 followed by 408 flat. And we could see a bigger amount of downside if we fail to make it back inside of this pennant. Now, what am I thinking? It depends on the news for tomorrow involving this whole debt ceiling. There's going to be an attempt to get back into it. And so far, SPY has been trying to rebound, but it's failing to do so far. We'll see how tomorrow goes. We're not really seeing a divergence that could cause that to happen immediately. But I do anticipate tomorrow there's going to be an attempt to get back up here. If it fails, we could get a big rug pull. All right, so be very careful here. Now, for the QQQ, here's my concern. Make sure you watch this carefully. The QQQ has a rising wedge. It's continuing to form. Let me just zoom out and show you. There's a clear rising wedge that's perpetuating, right? I could even hide my drawings. You guys could just see it right over here. It's pretty massive, actually. And then on the daily chart, you can see the same thing. There's a relatively large rising wedge that is continuing to form on a day-to-day basis. But here's the problem. Look at the MACD. Look at the RSI. The MACD is showing us that these peaks are getting smaller and smaller relative to the signal line. This is forming a negative divergence. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. You could zoom out all the way. I mean, you could still see it from like right there. But really, I'm just going to look from right here. There's clearly a bearish divergence on the RSI and the MACD. And this is a rising wedge. So eventually, could this thing pump a little bit? Could this thing hold up a little bit? Sure. I don't see way too much upside from here. I do believe it's going to remain more choppy up here at these extreme levels, but eventually the rug pull should come as we get to that June period. And I believe the debt ceiling could play a big role. So could inflationary numbers. So could the Fed. So be very, very careful here. On the 1 hour time frame, the same exact thing is developing. Let me just zoom out and show you what I'm talking about. Look at the MACD. It's actually even worse on the 1 hour time frame for the bulls because there's clearly a quadruple negative divergence that's developing right here on the MACD. The RSI has the same thing. This is like a triple or even a quadruple on the RSI. Look at how these things are declining while the price is making these higher highs. That's a big red flag. That does not tell us where the exact top is, of course. Sure, this thing could hold up for just a little bit longer, but for the medium to longer term, there's likely a rug pull still coming. The market is due for the correction. I showed you guys the forward PE ratios not too long ago, and it's very likely that this will take place. Now, why did the QQQ close a little bit in the green? Well, Google was pumping today. Google had a very nice run today, pumped very nicely, and Google is part of the reason why this held up as well as it did. It was up 2.68%. It's very overbought. And I want everyone to be careful. Google does have a bearish divergence developing. It really depends on if the top is in or not. If it's not in, I mean, this thing could pump to like a little bit higher, get closer to like 125 and then get the rug pull. Or it could just get rug pulled from here because of this bearish divergence. There's also there's also a smaller one. I think that's developing right here. There's a smaller bearish divergence too, right about here. So either way, I mean, it's just continuing to look weaker and weaker as the days go on. And I think it's best to be very careful in the market right now. Now, could Google pump more? Sure, it can. But like I said, bearish divergences are developing. I would be careful, and there likely is downside to come anyways. Part of why I'm saying this for the QQQ as well is because you could look at the SQQQ and see the same thing. You could look at current macros. Macroeconomic factors are telling us that, and we're continuing to see a bullish divergence on the SQQQ. Right here on the MACD and the RSI in the 1 hour time frame. On the daily, the same thing exists. The bullish divergence is still existent. It's likely going to lead to a big bounce for it. Why? Because of the market coming down. On the VIX, notice how this thing was forming a bullish divergence, and now it's starting to play out. We're starting to get a nice break to the upside. On the daily chart, I think it's easier to see on the daily. Right here on the daily, just look at the RSI. Nice uptrend right here. I'm also seeing the MACD making a higher low despite this thing making a lower low. This is due for that really nice upside. We got a breakout because of this. A small one to 21 came right back down, and now it's continuing to try to push up. What this tells me is the VIX is due to continue going. The VIX is undervalued, and as the VIX continues, it's going to be because of the market slowing down. Tesla had the shareholder meeting. So far, it's up in the after hours. It's very close to about 167 right now. But Tesla's still very indecisive and it's very choppy right now, just trading very sideways. There is a bullish divergence on Tesla that has developed. There is a chance Tesla's going to make an attempt to rebound. But so far, I just want to note that Tesla is it's not really holding up too nicely, and that's because it's very manipulated. So I don't expect Tesla to break out just because there's this bullish divergence. It could make an attempt to try to get back to like 170, but I'm not counting on it to hold too well because of the debt ceiling and because of other macroeconomic factors. So Tesla might try to get a pump back to the 170 area, but overall, I don't expect it to break out too much. I think there's still more downside likely to come for consumer discretionaries and EVs, thanks to many other factors, including the debt ceiling, the uncertainty surrounding it, and also what's going on with the banks, inflation, and the list goes on. The QQQ potentially coming down will affect how Tesla moves. The dollar index is potentially looking bullish. It's still holding up quite nicely. If it keeps going, that's going to be bearish for the markets. Let me just add one more thing. Excuse me. Looking at the QQQ, not the QQQ, Coinbase. Sorry, Coinbase. This is once again looking more bearish still to me. There's not much going on. It's just making those lower highs, and it's continuing to downtrend the 1 hour time frame. On the daily time frame, it still looks to me like it's going to be retesting that 54 area. And I think it still has more downside to come. I was predicting this yesterday. It's already starting to show some signs of downside. And what I predicted came true. For NEO, I told you it would likely remain very choppy, but you have to watch 7.9 if it does come down. NEO came down and closed at 7.91, very close to what I mentioned. Now, NEO does have more signs of weakness relative to the market because it's continuing to downtrend. It's just failing to hold $8. So we might see NEO just continue to make its way down. If it fails at 7.73, it's going to fill the gap at 7.63 and then retest 7.5 if it continues to break to the downside. NEO might try to bounce first with the market in the morning to get above $8, but it's likely the move will fail, and NEO might come down to fill this gap in the mid-sevens first before getting the real bounce. So please be careful with that. As far as Microsoft goes, it's up a bit again, not extremely it's not extremely strong though, and the reason I say that is because if you look at the RSI, it still is at a very flat state. The RSI is still downtrending despite it making those higher highs, and this is forming a negative divergence. Right, we're about to get a daily crossover on the PPO. What Microsoft is telling me is it could continue to just chop around because, as you could see, it's not really breaking out too hard. It's just becoming more choppy. I'm expecting this thing to start chopping more, but as time goes on, it's very likely that it's going to see downside and make its way back up to down to 300. The QQQ may play a big role in that happening moving forward, but I expect it to chop around first before we start to see the real downside. The bonds market or the smart money are continuing to sell. They're selling more and more and more. The HYG is continuing to drop. That oftentimes tells us that the market is due for a pullback. Finally, for Amazon, it's currently at about 113. I told you guys that Amazon could try to hold up a little bit more before the bigger downside to come, but it's forming a bearish divergence as of right now if it does not break this high. For tomorrow, if Amazon fails to break 115, we're likely going to see this thing get a retest of about 110, maybe cool off a bit if it fails to do so. For Nvda, I told you guys this thing can pump a little bit more before more potential downside. It actually made its way up to almost 300, holding up quite nicely. It just keeps going and going and going. So it's best to look at the bigger time frames, like the 4 hour on Nvda. It still has this bullish cross and it's not really confirming the downside just yet. but it has a negative divergence that's still developing. That tells me that maybe Nvidia tries to hold up, maybe it tries to keep going. But because of the negative divergences, there's likely downside to come anyways over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so it could hold up, chop around between 300 and about 290, remain in that range. But eventually, especially with the debt ceiling, Nvidia is going to come back down to 285, if not even lower, into the 280s, back to the 260s over the next couple of weeks, next month and a half. I could see that happening. A big rug pull. Okay, I'm still seeing that for Nvidia. It's just that it's holding up for now. Apple was also completely flat for the day. Apple has a negative divergence that's developing right now. It failed at 174. My target was 175 initially. For now, I'm not really seeing too much going on with this, right? This is very flat. Not too much is still playing out. And we do have this support around the 50 EMA for now. If Apple breaks below the 50, make sure you can watch this as a bearish signal. If it manages to hold above it, then that could still be a sign that Apple has more room to go. What I think Apple is going to do is it's likely going to continue to chop, just trade sideways. I mean, that's all it's been doing for the last couple of trading days, between 171 to about 174, a little bit below that, maybe like 173.5, back and forth and back and forth. It's been stuck for the last couple of days. I expect it to continue to do this for some time, but because of the debt ceiling, I don't expect it to break out too much more from here. I think the odds favor it coming right back down to 170 over the next few weeks and eventually getting the rug pull. For AMD, it's at 101 for now, holding up quite nicely. But what I am also seeing is I'm not seeing anything too negative for it compared to other stocks, but there is a much larger bearish divergence that currently exists. Now, is there a guarantee it has to play out? The only way for us to invalidate it is if this thing keeps breaking out. It could, still invalidate it. What I'm starting to see, though, is it's a little bit overbought, so it needs to cool off its RSI, maybe retest 98 first before it continues going. But for now, I do expect it to trade more sideways from now. For Meta, it's trading very sideways, not really doing anything. I'm not seeing anything too significant for it. It's just trading sideways, really chopping around quite a bit. We might just see it maintain this trend. This is almost looking like a megaphone pattern. It might retest the 50 EMA to get back to about the mid 230s before trying to bounce for there. I am seeing a potential test right there, but that's about it. There's not too much going on, not much volatility. Alibaba is at $89 right now. However, it's right before earnings, so get ready for earnings. There is technically a negative divergence, so it might cool off a little bit tomorrow. There is that gap down to 83, so it could retest like 85 tomorrow, but I'm not too worried because we have earnings coming out, and that's going to be huge for it. So it could make a big move after that. The 10-year Treasury yield is continuing to hold up. It still looks more bullish, and now the market's dropping as this thing goes up. If it continues to pop and fill this gap right here, it hasn't really gotten a close above that 35 plus area, the 35.7 area. And it could be getting closer to like 36.39. If that's the case, that would be more bearish for the markets if it keeps going. And so far, it looks like it's going to continue to do so. So I'm seeing more signals to suggest that the market might see some downside. But I'm always open-minded because we could just chop around a little bit longer before the real downside comes. But I am leaning more in favor of the bears. All right, so what am I seeing for the markets? Lots of chop tomorrow, and SPY is going to make an attempt to get back to this pennant right here, right? We're going to try to get back to the pennant. It's going to try to make its way back to the 411s, and it's going to likely continue to chop around. But if we get more negative news, which I think the odds are favoring, we're likely going to see SPY come all the way back down to 409, if not 408 very soon too. Okay, so I'm seeing chop and more downside. I don't really see a big breakout unless we get a very good piece of news, which I'm not seeing so far. And I do believe the odds favor more downside. All right, guys, so that's what I'm seeing for the markets. Thank you all so much for listening. Do not forget, I have some merch for you guys if you're interested in buying anything. And also don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends, not the Moomoo, I'm sorry, the Weeble link. Sorry about that, guys. The Weeble link. The offer ends very soon. If you sign up and deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day. The market to the moon is the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace